Hello, let's take another stab at trauma and look at the kind of work that we can do to improve our leadership and resolve our trauma. I'm going to tell you another story from another angle, and my goal and my hope is that by hearing these similar ideas, it's always the same ideas and the same frameworks. They're very simple. But using them along different storylines, you begin to get a better idea on what's going on with you, because it's more important. The more you understand about you and your own path with trauma, the better you're going to be at anything you do. Uh, if only because you're going to learn to see how trauma is blocking the people you're trying to work with. And it's going to help you to be a better leader because you will be able to hold a space where they can heal, where they can overcome that trauma, where they're no longer blocked by it or fighting with it. And so the way you put teams together and attract certain kinds of people at different levels of trauma to work in your companies, in your teams, in your projects, and try to guide them to solve the world's the symptoms of our world's collective trauma. We're all working on the symptoms. If only because you're able to interact in in a safer, freer way with your colleagues, that's already a very good reason to understand, to know more about trauma and how it comes into play in everything we do. So, what I'm going to do today is kind of explain how I start working with a person I've never seen before. Okay. So, people come to do coaching with me for many reasons. There's a large group of people who want to improve their career success, or they want to change jobs. There's another group of people who come to me through their bosses or through their HR departments, through their companies. Sometimes they've identified certain skills they need to improve, leadership skills. Sometimes there's a problem that they want to fix. And so what I do is I help the client understand which are the traumas that are playing behind the game. Why I'm repeating a certain pattern I wouldn't want to repeat. Look, the sun is coming out now just in front of my face, which is great because I just worked on the setting and the lighting and setting up this. But we're going to try to do. We're going to, I'm going to keep the masterclass going, okay? Because I do this stuff when I have the energy and the focus, and this is it. And then I lose it. Okay, with sun or in the shade, we'll see what happens. So, when people don't have a predefined goal that they want to work on, I like to start with a question. And the question I ask is, if you could make a wish, what would you wish for? The reason I ask that question, I often explain this to the client too, is I want to take the client out of the mumbo jumbo of their minds because we all spend a lot of time running around the maze or the labyrinth of our cognitive structure. And we have all of these beliefs and all of these assumptions and all of this knowledge and experience of life. And we're always going around the corridors that we know. We're looking for the solution. Yeah, we spend a lot of time doing that. And so sometimes people come to a coaching process and they start telling you what they want and they just get lost in their maze again. So they're talking and talking and talking and giving you all of these really complicated explanations about who they are, where they come from, and what they want to achieve. And I very often say, look, I don't need to know all of this. I'm the coach that tells you, don't tell me. It's not because I'm not interested, and it's not because I don't think it must be very interesting. It's because I want to focus this conversation on what is it you want to achieve and how can I help you achieve that? Yes. And it's also because running around in our cognitive maze or labyrinth of ideas and assumptions is one of the key resources. Well, the sun is really coming out now. Is one of the key ways our mind escapes emotion. So it's kind of what happens. Let me see if you can see this picture there. So this is your body, your back, legs, arms, and these are the emotions that come up from our unconscious mind and our body. And this is like the limit of consciousness, okay? And this is our conscious mind, our cognitive brain, and this is something really interesting and very rational and very necessary in the world where we love to spend time thinking, resolving, and going around in circles. Because when we're doing that, we can escape this because we don't know how to solve all of these emotions coming up here. Yeah. And it's not a rational choice. It's not a conscious choice. It's something that happens. If I stay on this side of the screen, we're going to have a better chance seeing my face. It's something that our mind does instinctively. And one of the things that I can do as a coach, because I'm sitting in front of you talking to you about stuff and seeing how you react, is I can tell you, oh, look, your mind is escaping again. Something on an unconscious level, a part of you detected that there was an intense emotion coming up and that you didn't have the resources to manage that emotion. So it has decided to run away, to escape. And we all have a number of familiar mechanisms that we use to escape. For example, this morning I was doing a coaching session with a client who's a really talented executive in Switzerland in a pharma company. And every time he has this nervous laugh, he has this chuckle that he does, and every time he does that laugh, I know that there's something going on underneath that he doesn't have the resources to face, and we've talked about it several times. So today he said to me, yesterday I got some bad news about the company and the future and the stability, the potential stability of my job. And I found it very funny and I had a very good laugh. And I said to him, well, you and I know that when you have this nervous laugh of yours, it's because you're escaping something that you're not ready to process. So we used the session to get into what it was he was escaping from yesterday. Yeah. It was pretty surprising because he thought it was all going to be bad stuff, but it wasn't. There was actually some really cool, interesting, and energizing stuff that he was also running away from because in our childhood trauma, we have suppressed a lot of things. We've suppressed most of what we suppress is the bad stuff, the fear, the guilt, the pain, the shame, the anger. Yeah. But we also suppress ourselves. We also suppress all of the stuff we would like to say yes to. The fun of going out and just playing as if there was no tomorrow, the safety of being a child and not having to worry about what's going on with our parents or with the family. We suppress our spontaneous instincts to enjoy life. And that becomes suppression of our erotic impulses as adults too. So then we have problems in our with our libido or with our couples or we're demotivated or depressed or we don't like our jobs because we're working on something that's really boring because what we're really talented and excited about is singing or playing or sports or something really wonderful. But we suppressed all of that a long time ago. And so it's it's the suppression has become like one of the highways in our cognitive structure. Now, if you look at the if you imagine your brain, your cognitive structure like a map full of roads, there's some really thick, big fundamental roads that that take you everywhere else. And sometimes the suppression is already there in those initial very nuclear roads that determine how you get from A to B in any process, any reasoning, any conclusion, any assumptions in your mind. No. So, yes, sometimes we've become so used to suppressing all of the bad stuff and all of the stuff that was really us by going into these. mechanisms. This could be a fantasy, this could be my job, this could be an addiction, this could be other people. Sometimes I paint this picture, and instead of painting a cloud like here, I put a bunch of people here. And I say, look, when you're focusing on saving all of these people, you're escaping yourself. I like to use pictures like these because they're very graphic. And that comes back to the question I ask. Why do I ask the question of what wish, if you could make a wish, what would you wish for? And very often people look at me like, what? A professional wish? They start to ask me clarification questions, and I say, it doesn't matter, whatever comes to your mind. But we have suppressed that instinctive ability. If I asked a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, if you could make a wish, what you would you wish for? They would have no trouble answering that question. But for us as adults, we've become so rational and um, so influenced by all the limitations and suppressions in our cognitive structure, in our rational minds, that we don't use that language anymore. And the cool thing about using the language of fairy tales and legends and leprechauns and making a wish is that it takes us straight back to our unconscious mind, to the magician behind, to the what was it, El Mago de Oz, um, the master. Well, I can't remember how you say it in English right now, but you know the woman with the red shoes dancing, and the Wizard of Oz. That's it. This is my menopausal brain fog coming into play. So, our unconscious mind sometimes is like the Wizard of Oz, and it's making us look at some things and forget others. And it has all of these blind spots and all of that. It's there to protect us. Yeah, it's there. There's a very good reason why all of that is there, because remember we said the one or several traumas or long traumas. Because I like to talk. Look, I use this image to explain what trauma is. So this is us again. You see the same figure and the same level. It's like the level of the water, but also the level of consciousness. And this is my rational brain here. And these are my parents, my husband or wife or partner, my job, my children, the world. And this is the interface. So I interact with all of this stuff in my life through this interface. And this interface is a well, and it's a well where there are several layers of frozen trauma, of frozen emotions. Okay. And you never know how many layers there are here. It can be a very deep well. Okay. Because because we've done lots of stuff, there's a lot of trauma coming down the generations and families and landing on our shoulders. So we're trying to interact with the world and do our best, but the way we get information is already filtered. We have a bunch of blind spots because we don't see things as they are. We have blind spots because there are emotions that cannot be touched here. And they can't be touched because we don't have the resources to ground them. So our vagus nerve knows exactly which emotions we have the skills and ability to tolerate and to ground, and which ones are too intense. So when we come across somebody telling us a big, long story full of pain and anguish and fear, and it's a level 15, and I'm only equipped to manage fear of level 3, what my vagus nerve does is shut down. It turns out I stop listening. I distance myself from the conversation. And the way we distance ourselves from the conversations is by judging and giving advice. Does that sound familiar? Do a bunch of people start judging you and giving you advice when you tell them about a problem? Well, now you know why they're doing it. It's because they're overwhelmed by the emotional intensity that you're bringing to the conversation. They can't deal with it, and they're not even deciding to do it. It's their vagus nerve is orchestrating the way they respond to that emotion. This is too intense. I can't ground myself if I connect with this emotion, so I'm going to disconnect from it. I'm going to distance myself. So there's blind spots, so I don't see it, I don't hear it, I can't imagine what you're talking about, and I don't want to look at anything like remotely like what you're talking about because that's going to awaken this level four of terrible sadness, and I won't be able to put it to squash it back in there. So I have to stop listening to you. But there's also a bunch of things that I will do. For example, I will choose certain kinds of people that I can interact with through the levels of this interface that I can tolerate and manage. So I'm selecting the part of the world that I can tolerate. And I'm leaving out the rest of the world that I can't deal with. I can't tolerate this. Okay. And all of that is creating a dynamic in which I go out to save the world, and what I'm actually doing is repeating my traumas. And by repeating my traumas, I might be bringing as much rubbish and pollution and horror on the world as I think I'm trying to clean up, or even more. So I might start like a really eco-friendly business, I don't know, selling sustainable wraps for babies, for wrapping your baby around your body. That sounds like really eco-friendly and wonderful. It's going to make the world a better place, and it's going to improve baby trauma because they're going to be stuck to their mother's body for a long number of hours. And it sounds great. It's rationally great. But I can do that in two ways. I can do it with repeating my traumas, where, for example, I had a very judgmental mother, a mother who was always criticizing me, for example. So when I go to talk to other mothers, I judge them and I tell them they're bad mothers if they had their birth, if they had their child at a hospital, because hospitals are bad. They're not eco-friendly for babies. Or, like that documentary that's on YouTube, it's really famous, The Business of Being Born. It's a very interesting documentary. Or I might do it judging the people who offer all of the different sustainable cloths that I use to make the wraps. So I might end up choosing one that's so expensive that then nobody can buy my wraps. So everybody feels traumatized when they see my beautiful brand on Instagram and all of my beautiful pictures and videos. And me and my friends, we're all posh and beautiful and perfect, and all of our pictures are there's a wonderful grace, and the baby looks happy, and the wrap looks great, and then it's so expensive that all of the potential mothers I was trying to help, all of these girls here are feeling unworthy when they look at my brand, you know? So I made it up on the go, but that's an example on how I can go and do something that was really well intentioned and was going to save the world. And I'm actually repeating exactly the same pattern that my mother repeated with me. My mother criticized me all the time, made me feel unworthy. And now I started a whole beautiful business with a beautiful intention. And it turns out that it makes lots of women feel unworthy when they come across my brand, my price, my cloth, my story, my videos, my everything. Okay. But if I work through that trauma, if I can resolve the stuff that went wrong with my mother, if I can overcome all of the pain and all of the way it made me become stuck in a pattern of searching for validation outside of myself. That's what I would do if I have a mother who criticized me the whole time. I would be constantly, instinctively trying to come up with some way to get her validation. So I forget that I can look for my own validation. It becomes a blind spot for me. Okay. That's the kind of stuff that happens in this interface. It's really, really interesting. Yeah. So then I might come to a session with a lady like Pino to do coaching and say, well, my business, I have this little company that makes these sustainable wraps for babies and and we're having trouble because we're not selling enough, we're not making enough money, And I would say, okay, but there's lots of stuff to be solved there. So if you could make a wish, what would you wish for? Do you think she's going to wish for more money? Maybe. But chances are, when you go back to that language of legends and storytelling and leprechauns and wishes, It's like you're asking the unconscious mind what is really important for you right now. That's why I like that question, because it goes to symbolic thinking. And remember that the unconscious mind is the Wizard of Oz who's orchestrating what you think, what you prioritize, what you choose, and how you interface with the world. This is the Wizard of Oz. Your unconscious mind is deciding what you prioritize here, how you do it, how you interface with everything. Yeah. And I call him the Wizard of Oz because you don't see him act. You just see the kingdom and say, oh, wow, this is so pretty or it's so ugly. But you don't see how he's operating and you don't realize how incredibly powerful your unconscious mind is on operating you and making you, turning you to kind of into a puppet that is repeating patterns to escape from trauma or escape from emotions. Yeah. And the unconscious mind can only express itself using body sensations, emotions, instincts, and symbols. That's why dreams, what you dream at night, it's so interesting to analyze because it's full of symbols. And those symbols are communicating stuff to you. For example, last night I had a very stressful dream. I dreamt that there was I dreamt that there was a huge octopus in the kitchen of the house I grew up in with my family. And in the dream, I was reading an article online about a very aggressive octopus, a giant octopus that was attacking one of these old transatlantic boats like the Titanic with lots of chimneys on it. And I could see the tentacles of the octopus grabbing the chimneys and breaking them off and throwing them in the sea. And I was reading this, in my dream, I could see the picture moving and I was reading the online article and I was looking at the octopus in the kitchen of my parents' house where I grew up. Um, and at one point, and I was like, oh my God, we're in danger with this octopus. We have to do something about it. He's very destructive and very aggressive. So at one point in the dream, I grabbed the octopus and carried him out of the house. And I remember in my dream, I was trying to hold on to its head in such a way that it couldn't attack me, it couldn't bite me, which, it's not the way an octopus would attack me, but that's the way my dream went. It's funny because I have a Yorkshire Terrier who's just barking right now. Oh yeah, Pushkin. And if I want to, sometimes Pushkin doesn't want to go out on the street or he doesn't want to he wears a nappy at night. So when he doesn't want to do something, he gets into his bed and he puts himself into a little tight knot, and he looks at me with a face of, I dare you to try to come near me because I'm going to bite you. So what I do is I grab the back of his head so he can't move it and he can't bite me. And once I have immobilized his head is when I grab the rest of his 3 kilogram body. He's this size. I grab the rest of him and pull him out into what I need to do. So in my dream, I was holding on to the octopus in a similar way, and the octopus was kind of looking at me. Do octopi have eyes? I think they do. I'm not sure now. Yes, they must. But the creature in my dream was looking back at me, and the colors of the octopus were similar to Pushkin's colors. And I was carrying him out of the apartment where we grew up, holding him from behind so he couldn't bite me, as if I was holding Pushkin. And at the same time, I was being careful not to hurt him. Yeah. And I took him down to the land floor where the porter, the guy who used to take care of the entire property. It was an apartment block, so there was a porter, a concierge, if you like, who received messages and let people in and out and stuff like that. And the guy who was the porter at my parents' house when I was a teenager appeared in the dream, and I kind of left the octopus there, and he used some kind of like a kind of flat box that closed over the octopus, and that was the end of the thread. So I'm telling you this dream because it was a very powerful dream, and I'm going to work on a session tomorrow with my guide or coach on what that means and how that relates to some health stuff that I did a blood analysis this week, and I saw some stuff going on with my thyroid gland. So I have to look at some stuff. I'm going to talk to the doctors on Monday. So I'm following the traditional medicine to see what has to be done and what other analysis have to be done to see if there's anything serious to worry about here, what the treatment is, etc. But I'm also going to look at the emotional component that could be behind this sickness, because yes, in every kind of sickness and symptom we have in our bodies, there is something, there is an emotion hiding, there is something related to a trauma, okay? Um, but it's very dangerous to go down the road of I'm going to ignore traditional medicine and I'm just going to work on this, doing really weird stuff I see on Instagram, and I see influencers promise it's going to save everything. And I'm going to resolve my trauma so that my sickness gets better. That's that it doesn't, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to do that. All this to say that the symbols that you see in your dreams are the way your unconscious mind is communicating to you. So there's something in the symbol of the octopus. In the symbol, for me, the fact that the octopus was in the kitchen is very revealing. It has to do with my mother because the kitchen was my mother's territory, and I had a very complicated relation with my mother. So, I know what the symbolism is about. But those analyzing the symbols that come up in your dreams is a way to help you work through your traumas. It's also using symbols is also very interesting to mobilize and release stuck emotions in your body. And so with this client, I did a session with this morning when we started to go into what is the laughter about and what are the feelings that your brain is saving you from with this laughter. Let's go into your body, find an area of your body that feels uncomfortable. And we used the three tools you've heard me talk about in the short videos. There's always three tools to use in order to work with emotion. It's our attention focus, our breathing, and our movement. Yeah. And in attention focus is where you can also talk about visualization tools. And in visualization tools, you very often use symbolic thinking. So we go back to the importance of symbols to communicate with your body, its emotions and its sensations. Yeah. Um, and so this morning, we were working through the session. He found an area of his body that was uncomfortable. And so I asked him to focus his attention, the flashlight of his mind, focus the flashlight of your mind on that sensation, and ask yourself questions about what size is it? How far does it reach up, down, to the sides, to the front, and to the back of your body? What color would it be if it had a color? If it was an object, what object would it be? What is the texture? What feeling? What does it feel like? This sensation, this uncomfortable sensation that you have, is it a solid? Is it a gas? Is it a gooey, liquidy kind of stuff? And all of these questions are asking for images or for sensations. We're playing with symbols, yes. And once we have asked all the questions, sometimes you ask the question and you don't get an answer. There's a blank, especially when you're not used to doing this kind of exercise at the beginning. It can feel a bit frustrating because you don't see anything. But I put a lot of emphasis on don't worry if there isn't an answer, because it's fine. This is like a technique that you learn to use, so you don't have to get it right the first time. And in fact, it's more like exploring and being surprised by the things that appear than getting it right. This work is not about getting stuff right because you never know what the answer looks like. So if you're trying to get stuff right, you're actually repeating a pattern that comes from the trauma. Yeah, that happens to a lot of people too. So, interestingly, once we had asked questions about the texture, the color, the shape, then I asked him to use his breath. So remember, the three tools are attention, focus, breath, and movement. I asked him to bring Imagine he could bring each breath of new, fresh air, bring it to that area to massage that shape, that structure of sensation. Imagine that each breath of fresh air, and this is where we're visualizing again, we're using symbolic thinking, we're using images, because sometimes the area that is uncomfortable is your left knee. There's no way the air that you breathe in is going to physically go to your left knee. We all understand that. But if you tell your body a story of how clean blue air comes in and goes down to your knee and massages that area, embraces it, doesn't suppress it, but tries to give it space and to allow it to expand and dissolve and spread through the body. Those are the images that we want to use. The body is like a child listening to you tell it a nighttime story. It's really fascinating. And again, these are things that you cannot force on yourself and you cannot force on a client because it grows slowly on people. Okay. But the power of symbolic thinking is that it's very well understood by the unconscious mind and the body. And so if I start to imagine that I can take my breath, clean breath comes in my nose, goes down to my knee, massages, embraces, brings warmth, does something nice and loving and warming to that area of sensation, at some point, I might find that emotions start to come up. So my body is going to start to respond. Or maybe not emotions, but maybe the sensation is going to improve. So a lot of times when I do this with my clients, they realize, wow, I feel better now. It feels better. In fact, this client this morning, um, when I asked a number of questions with symbolic thinking to understand what that structure of sensation was about. It was the most uncomfortable part of his body at that moment. And then once he knew what it felt like, then I started to ask him to use the breath and use movement. So again, the three tools: attention, focus, breathing, and movement. You use the breath, you breathe in, bring the breath to the area that you want to relax or you want to help express, not suppress the emotion, but help express. And you imagine that when you breathe out, you're bringing out the weight, the tension, the discomfort. So you breathe in nice stuff going to that area. You breathe out ugly stuff getting away from that area. You're like trying to clean it out. Yeah. And also, I said, use a little bit of movement. Experiment with different kinds of movement in that area. Feel what changes when you're breathing, keeping your attention on that area, and you're using, just try different movements. I even suggested at one point, try different rhythms of the breath. So try accelerating your breath, or try slowing it down really slowly. Or try an angry breath. So allowing your breath to dance to see which of all of these different rhythms of breathing clicks with that sensation. It feels like it's the right one, like the one that allows it to move in a way that is comfortable or that flows somehow. Yeah. And at the end of the exercise, he said he felt better. And he said it felt like Coca-Cola coming up, like the sensation was here. It had felt like Coca-Cola coming up, like when you take the top off and it goes, psst. And it was, he said it was Coca-Cola, spicy Coca-Cola. So you see again, the way we describe our sensations and our emotions is very often using symbolic thinking. So symbolic thinking is a wonderful tool to use in order to talk to your unconscious mind and get answers from your unconscious mind. Another thing that can happen when you're doing these exercises is that suddenly memories come up. You suddenly remember something. And that arrives in 99% of my sessions, of my coaching sessions, is we're talking about something or we've described, let's go back to this imaginary lady with the business of the sustainable wraps for babies that's going around judging all of the women without unintentionally. It's not her intention. She's repeating the pattern of trauma that she grew up with. Yeah. So we could have a session where I ask her, if you had a wish, what you wish for? And I would think she would reply something like, I want my wish is to improve the lives of all the mothers out there. So then I would ask questions about that response. What does that mean? Why is that important to you? Or, for example, why is that wish about all of the mothers out there and not about you? So, you get one chance, one opportunity. Like you don't see leprechauns every day. A leprechaun is a small elf kind of man that appears in Ireland. My mother's from Northern Ireland. And when we went on holidays to Ireland when I was small, I loved all of the stories about leprechauns and the el arco iris, the how do you say it? Arcoiris, arc-en-ciel. See, it comes out in French, it comes out in Spanish, but it won't come out in the rainbow. There it goes. At the end of the rainbow, there's a pot of gold, and if you found it, so I loved all of those kind of stories. So you have to be very lucky to see a leprechaun, and if you see a leprechaun, he has to give you a wish. But if you look away, he's going to try to trick you. This is what the stories say. He's going to try to distract you and trick you because as soon as you look away, he can disappear. So I used to practice when I was a child going up in the car, driving up, take an airplane to Dublin and then drive up to Strabane. That's where my mother was from, to see my grandmother. In the car, I would be looking out on the green fields and looking at the rainbows and thinking of all the strategies I was going to use to make sure that leprechaun didn't fool me. So, I mean, if you're only going to get one wish, why on earth would you use the wish for all of the mothers in the world and not for yourself? And that is where the interesting questions come out, because that's where her unconscious mind would be telling me my path or my idea of how to be happy in the world is about everybody else except me. So I'm programmed to do things back at the front. I want to make everybody happy so that I can be happy. And by the way, we interact with the world, or we interact with our jobs and the companies that feed us and that give us a salary each month and give us stuff to do. We repeat the same patterns we had with our mother, okay? Because it's very unconscious, okay? So we repeat our traumas with the companies we work for and with the world. So all of these activists, I think it's great to be an activist. It's wonderful to want to make the world a better place, but a lot of them are going out and doing the same stuff that they did with their mothers. And so they're not achieving the same results that they could be achieving if they were free of trauma. So that would be the first question is make a wish. And let's see what your unconscious mind responds. And let's think about the implications of that response. Why is that wish for other people? Why is it not for you? And along in that conversation, I have a specially trained eye to see what we need to work on in order to help that person to advance. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go straight to the root of all of her traumas in the first conversation because she may not be ready for that. We really need to advance slowly in the conversation, working on what she wants. Yeah. I usually use other pictures like this, so I will explain all of this stuff about, look, what you need to do is ground emotion. So this is the level of intensity or tension, and this is time. And every time that you encounter, every time you're triggered, everything you find in life creates an emotion, and every emotion starts slowly, grows up to a maximum, and then it self-consumes. So this is why emotions are like water. They're like waves. They're a current of energy. Yeah. And so I explain that when we're at the top of this current of this wave of energy, when we're at high levels of intensity, our thinking becomes distorted. So we start to exaggerate in the way we interpret things. And if we're sad, we only think sad thoughts. If we're angry, we only think angry thoughts. If we're scared, we can only come up with very scary narratives. Okay. And then when we come back out of it, the next day we wake up and I think, why was I thinking such black stuff like last night? When you recognize that yesterday or last week or last year, your whole lookout on the world, the whole way you analyze situations was a lot blacker than they actually were, or a lot more positive and wishful and hopeful than things actually were. That's when you recognize that your thinking was distorted. And then you realize, aha, when I see that, it means that I've been able to come back down here. And back down here is when I'm grounded. So this is the first thing that I explain to clients in a first session, is that anything we're going to be able to change about your life, improve your behavior, improve the way you respond to your mother or your partner or your children or your job or whatever, you need to be grounded with your feet on the floor at low levels of intensity. So it's all about you need to start learning to ground yourself. So attention, focus, breathing, and movement. It's written in Spanish, and you're looking at it from the wrong side. Yeah. But this is a story I use all of the time. And so my client this morning, when he was laughing, that told us when he has this nervous laugh, he's up here. And in fact, this picture has a variation. It's also very important that I have here, because this is a picture that tells us about shock. So you see, it's the same wave of emotion. And what this picture is showing us is that I went through an experience where my vagus nerve decided to go into shock. And from that moment on, the top part of intensity of this wave of emotion was frozen. I no longer go in here anymore. I've been coming up here, and when I get here, I find coping mechanisms to slip through underneath and come back down. So I never go in here. And most of our coping mechanisms and most of the patterns we repeat that we don't like, they're about escaping or avoiding an intensity of emotion that's frozen inside of my body and that I don't know how to resolve yet. So that's why if I'm talking to somebody who is triggering this level of fear, and I have put that into a cupboard. I have put all these neon signs and warning barriers, and there is no way that my unconscious mind is going into that level of fear. I find a way to escape the conversation by judging, by giving advice, by talking about something else, by suddenly getting on a call on my phone, getting distracted. There's a million ways we do this, and we don't even know we're doing it. I escape. Why? Because I can't go in here. So what does it mean to resolve this trauma? It means that slowly, by applying attention focus, breathing, and movement, I am going to slowly elevate this level of tolerance up here, and then up here, and then up here. And I'm going to recuperate the full range of sensitivity to this emotion. This is also a very interesting graph because it shows you that if you cannot go into this level of intensity with a negative emotion, you can't go into it with a positive emotion either. Why? Because this hidden stuff that's frozen, where is it stored? It's stored in the tissues that you would have used to express that emotion. So if this emotion is anger, for example, I would have used my hands to defend myself or to hit the person who was being violent to me. I would have hit that person back unless I needed that person to survive because that person was my father or my mother. So we go back to this example of the lady with a sustainable business and a very judgmental mother, a mother who's always criticizing me. So she's using more aggression than needed. She's attacking me sometimes with those judgments. She's not doing it on purpose, but she probably went through the same thing with her mother. And that's where you see that this woman's childhood trauma is a repetition of things that happened several generations before. So it's coming down the generations. That's why we call it multi-generational family trauma, because there is a pattern of women being very judgmental, critical, and sometimes overly aggressive with their children. And it's unintentional. And it's the opposite, exactly the opposite of what they want to do. But it's what comes out. Okay. And as it comes out, my client turns out to have a pattern where she cannot express this level of aggression. And so she cannot defend her space because she's not comfortable. So where is the anger stored? Normally, and this is never scientific, there's never a predefined scientific universal truth because each body is different. But most of us express our aggression with our arms and our hands because we use our hands to grab the stuff we need to live, and we use our hands to defend our space and keep other people from invading us. Yeah. So when we have had experiences in our childhood where our mother was constantly criticizing, we did not dare to say, stop, this is enough, this is too much. We couldn't do that. Why? Because we needed our mother to survive. So the instinct of aggression to say stop, to say no, it was frozen. Where was it frozen? Here. In my fingers, in my hands, in my arms, in my shoulders, and the top of my neck, and the top of my back. So when I'm 40, 50, etc., I begin to have a lot of symptoms and problems along this. Is this where I get hurt? Because there's all of this stored emotion that hasn't been released. Okay. It's really fun, really interesting when you look at it. There is an amazing logic to the way the unconscious mind operates and thinks. And the symbolism is very interesting too, because this lady will probably have dreams about, I don't know, dreams about like being squashed in a tunnel. So she's trying to push the walls of the tunnel, and the tunnel's getting smaller, and she can't push them, for example. No, there's a symbol there. I cannot express my anger. So it's stuff that you kind of what I do is I see something or I have an assumption and I lay it out on the table. And when I lay it out on the table, I always say to the client, look, I don't know what I'm looking at because this is your life. You have all of the information. So if there's any truth to what I'm saying, your brain is going to hold on to it. Your unconscious mind is going to keep thinking about it. And it's like I'm planting a seed and it's going to start to grow. And you're going to remember stuff. You're going to question stuff. You're going to have different dreams. You're going to have different dreams to the ones you've had up to now, where this hypothesis that I'm bringing, it's playing around in your mind. Okay, so if it's relevant to what you're facing right now, your brain is going to hold on to it. If it's not relevant, or if I'm wrong, you will forget about it. Of all of the stuff that we've discussed in this 90-minute sessions, because I like to do hour and a half sessions. I don't like to be constrained by the hour. I like to have time to bring stuff up and especially to ground stuff and leave the client comfortable and safe and grounded with all of the stuff that we've brought up. We bring stuff up. I want to leave the session with a person well grounded and able to process all the stuff that came up. If you forget about it, when you leave here tomorrow, the next day, etc., you're only going to remember the stuff that's relevant to you. You're going to forget the rest of the stuff. And why do I know this? Because I know that our brains, through our unconscious mind, is what it best does is not to store information. What our brains are best at doing is about forgetting the information they don't need right now. And I know this because I did engineering. So I can physically remember a lot of moments when I was studying at school and later as an engineer. I can remember the moment where I was sitting in an exam and I heard the 5 questions they were asking me, and at that moment, I would mentally hit the button of delete on everything else I had studied because I didn't need it anymore. Oh, I can stop trying to remember these 3 things. I don't need that anymore. Forget, forget, forget. Delete, 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 delete. Some people are better at remembering stuff. I'm not good at remembering stuff. I never remember stuff. I'm good at processing stuff. That's my strong point. So this is an introduction. Again, it's another story I'm telling you about how trauma operates, how I go about it, how I start working with somebody. And I focus on teaching people this is what you need to do is learn to ground emotion. Because if there's a huge chunk of, or a huge well, if you have a well full of frozen emotions that need to come out, okay, they can only come out if you have the resources to ground them. If you don't know how to ground them and you can't tolerate that intensity of fear, then it's not going to come out. And that is the magic of the vagus nerve. It's wonderful. This is polyvagal theory. Polyvagal theory tells us Stephen Porges. Yeah, the other day I saw Thomas Hubel showing the same diagram. We're all using the same diagram because it's great, because anybody who's working with trauma can recognize it's a great, very simple model to explain why our vagal nerve chooses to go into a shock reaction and a trauma. But it's also a great way to understand when and how and why our vagus nerve decides to reveal information or bring up emotion from a trauma that we'd never thought about. I was exchanging WhatsApps this week with a therapist that works with the TRE method, and he's very good. And I met him when we were certifying the TRE method over 10 years ago. This is Dr. David Berselli's TRE method. And I did my first level of certification, and then I didn't continue doing the rest, but he did continue doing the rest. And we were talking about, what's up with you, what's up with me? And I said, well, I'm working on a lot of perinatal trauma. So perinatal trauma is the trauma, the stuff that happens around your birth. Perinatal, around birth. Yes, so it can be stuff that happened when you were in your mother's womb. It can be stuff that happened during your birth. A lot of birth processes are very traumatizing because a lot of babies and confront death. You can die when you're being born. Your mother can die when you're being born. So there can be a lot of trauma around how a birth happens, but also in the first few months after being born. And that is like the deepest, most complex, and most symbolic kind of trauma you can find because you don't have the memories. You don't have all of those pictures that you might have of your baptism or when you were 5 years old. You don't have your brain is not developed enough to have all of the memories of conversations or of wallpaper or of the lighting or no, it's a lot more. You're still trying to form an understanding of how the world operates and works. What is this? When you're born, it's like somebody suddenly stuck you on Mars or on Pandora, the planet in the movie Avatar, and everything is different. Gravity is different. The way you move is different. Temperature is different. Everything is different. You don't know how any of that operates when you're born. Before you're born, you're stuck at a constant temperature in the dark. You don't have to breathe because you're the cord, the umbilical cord does everything for you. You don't have to eat. You don't have to poo. You're just like blah, la, 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 la. And then suddenly your entire world starts to go woo, and you appear in a place with people dressed in green or in white. It's cold, it's noisy. What are these people? Are they colors? What am I looking at? So That's why perinatal trauma is the deepest kind of trauma that we can resolve. And it's the one that's down here. You only get to perinatal trauma when you've worked through all of the other layers of trauma. Okay, because these are the most intense emotions. And that is another graph that I show people very often, and that is very important. I have it here. Here it is. Okay, and this graph is very important because this explains, so this is the brain or the mind, okay, and we all have this instinctive notion that our character is built in layers, like an onion. So there's layers of the onion, so layer of when I was a little microbe in my mom's belly, and then I was born, and then I was one and two and three and four and five and six and seven, and so I develop my character, and then I reach 18 or 21 and I'm out here. And so what do I start to do? I start to live my life and discover that there are things that aren't working well for me. So I go back in the spiral and I resolve stuff that happened here. And then I keep working and I resolve stuff that happened here. And then I keep having these boyfriends or girlfriends where I repeat the same pattern. So as I resolve stuff that happened later, I gather the resources, the strength, and the ability to begin to resolve the stuff that happened earlier in the deeper layers. Yeah. And this is showing the amount of emotion that I need to release and express and cry out through my eyes in order to solve traumas at different levels. Yeah. So if I have one trauma happen here, and I explained this in the first master class, I have a car accident at 5. This is going to represent 3,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools of negative emotion. The exact same accident or event 1 year later would express 3 or 4 times of emotion. So now we're talking about 12,000 or 15,000 Olympic-sized pools of negative emotion. So as you achieve the center of the onion, the center of your personality, you get to perinatal trauma. And when you get to perinatal trauma, the intensity of the emotions that you need to be able to express and resolve can be infinite. It is a huge amount of pain. Yeah. And so remember that all of that emotion has to come out and it has to be grounded. And then more emotion comes out and I have to learn to ground it again. And this takes time. Okay. So I might uncover some emotion on a Monday and spend a couple of weeks um, processing it, feeling it, understanding that it's distorting my thinking. So I learn to operate in such a way where I don't believe what I'm thinking when I'm in the middle of an intense emotion. At the beginning, I start to run around crying fire, 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 because I believe everything I'm thinking, because that's what I've always done. Okay. So there's a learning curve to operating with very intense emotion. And there's a learning curve that is happening instinctively in your life already that is allowing you to dwell deeper into the deeper, more primal layers of the trauma that built the personality you have today. So that's why you never know how many layers of trauma you still have to work through. And I've been doing this very intensively. I would say it's taken up maybe 70% of my time, more or less, in the last 15 years. It's a long time, okay? And still, now I have this thing with my thyroid gland. I have the dream with the octopus. I'm working through a very nuclear, very perinatal, original part of who I am and why I'm here and what my life is about. Okay. So I don't know anybody who's already solved it all. If I do meet somebody who solved it all, I will say, wow. But I don't know, because then, well, where is the end of the well? How deep does this well go? That's another question, no? And how far back do you go? And what happens before we're born? Haha, big questions. So that's enough for today. I hope you got ideas. I'm going to show you one last picture that I use very often too. Very important. And this picture is about self-regulation. It's a critical concept I talk about in a first session too, because I say to the client, you need to learn tricks and tools and techniques to connect with the emotion, to open the tap and allow the water to come out of the Olympic-sized swimming pools. So you do stuff that helps you connect to the emotion, like the exercises I did this morning with my client, using attention, focus, breath, and movement. And when the emotion starts to come out, you need to find that you are able to ground yourself again. So you might have a bad hour or a bad afternoon of feeling terrible and crying or kicking the ground or doing stuff that expresses very negative emotion. Then you need to feel that you come back to yourself. So you don't do any more exercises to connect to emotion until you have grounded it. And once you have grounded it and you feel like yourself again, you can do more exercises to help you connect to emotion, open the tap, and allow that big deposit of frozen emotion to start coming out. When that emotion begins to overwhelm you, you close the tap. You do stuff that separates you from emotion, that disconnects you from emotion. And that stuff can be you go back to work, you go out with friends, you go see a movie, you have a glass of wine, you go play with your kids. And maybe even you have some medication prescribed by your doctor, some anxiety pills, or maybe some CBD stuff that you know is going to help you down regulate and feel grounded again. Okay, as long as you're not overdoing the medication and you have a doctor supervising your medication, you're going to be fine. And with alcohol, well, we all self-medicate with alcohol because alcohol disconnects us from emotion. It gives us a rest. So as long as you're not overdoing it, okay, have some alcohol if it's going to help you. The important thing is is go into the emotion, come back out of it, ground it. Then you come back in, then you come back out. This is self-regulation. And I tell my clients, if you notice that after a couple of days, you cannot come back down by yourself, you cannot ground yourself, you write me a message and we exchange messages. And if needed, I'll get on the phone and I'll help you come back down. Yeah. So if you find that you've done something like psychedelics or ayahuasca or all of this fun stuff that everybody's doing, and it's brought out all of this emotion and you cannot find yourself again because you cannot ground yourself, please go out and find a professional, psychologist, a psychiatrist, a good coach, not one of these loony guys who sell all kinds of weird stuff on Instagram and YouTube and blah, blah. Somebody who really has an understanding on how to help you ground complicated emotion. That is what this business is about. Essentially, it's about processing emotion, defreezing old emotion that's coming from trauma, processing it, understanding the information that comes with that emotion, grounding it. And you ground it when you express it. Yeah, that's an important thing I didn't explain with this graph. When you're trying to ground emotion, you use your breathing and movement because that allows the emotion to keep moving. When I feel a negative emotion, I instinctively reduce my breath wave. I stop breathing or I breathe very shallow breaths and I get stuck. So when I breathe again and allow movement, and this is what the TRE method is about too. It's about bringing in voluntary movement so that the shaking allows me to continue to express the emotion. So there are two ways I will come down. One way is I'm able to deprogram it to bring it back down, just breathing and grounding myself. Okay. But sometimes the only way I'm going to be able to ground the emotion is by completing the wave, allowing it to be expressed. And expressed means it has to go through my entire body. If I don't feel it, I'm not expressing it. If I'm not expressing it, I cannot release it. And if I don't release it, I'm not resolving it. It's still inside me. Okay. So what's inside me, it has to come out. And it can only come out if I allow myself to feel the discomfort of that emotion, of that grief or that pain or that fear, traveling the tissues of my body as if I was a guitar, expressing the music out into the environment. I leave you with that thought. I hope you enjoyed this masterclass. If you have questions, doubts, comments, let me know. And I will continue to think of approaches and stories and ways to help you understand more about your life story and your trauma and how all of this stuff is perfectly applicable to what we're doing in the office. I think I'll do a masterclass about that the next time, yeah? How all of these grounding techniques fit into managing a team in a big multinational or in a startup or, getting your friends to finish that trip you all did to Rome where you're all fighting and nobody wants to talk to anybody. Okay, have a good weekend and remember that your trauma is not a drama. It's the door to greatness. It's the path that's going to take you to a place and a way of being you could never have imagined. And from there is from where you will save the world and make it a better place. Once you're free of your traumas, not before.